June 6, 1944. Utah Beach, Normandy. The acrid smoke of burning diesel fuel and cordite hung thick over the blood-stained sand as Staff Sergeant Thomas Lum, attached to the 4th Infantry Division's intelligence section, crouched behind a disabled Sherman tank, scribbling coordinates into a waterproof notebook with trembling fingers. I kept thinking about my father's restaurant back in Sacramento. He told me I'd never be American enough. Now here I am, translating intercepted German radio traffic while bullets snap overhead. Maybe this is what American enough looks like. Through the chaos of machine gun fire and artillery concussions, he had just finished interrogating a terrified Wehrmacht prisoner who revealed a hidden artillery battery targeting the beachhead. The story of Chinese-American interpreters in World War II begins not with military necessity, but with a contradiction so profound it defined an entire generation. In 1941, when the United States declared war on the Axis powers, approximately 77,000 Chinese lived in America. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 remained federal law. Chinese immigrants could not become naturalized citizens. They could not own property in many states. They could not marry white Americans in most jurisdictions. Yet when draft notices arrived, they came regardless of citizenship status. The War Department faced an unusual problem. Army intelligence desperately needed translators fluent in European and Asian languages. Japanese-American Nisei soldiers would become legendary in the military intelligence service in the Pacific. But the European theater needed something different. Men who could speak Chinese dialects, European languages, and English, a rare combination born from immigrant communities in port cities where Chinese merchants navigated multiple linguistic worlds. Between 1942 and 1945, approximately 20,000 Chinese Americans served in the United States Armed Forces. Unlike their African American counterparts, Chinese Americans were not segregated into separate units. Unlike Japanese Americans, they faced no mass incarceration of their families. Their experience occupied a strange middle ground in America's racial hierarchy. They could serve in integrated units but faced deep prejudice. They wore the same uniform as white soldiers, but encountered the same slurs in training camps. They fought for a nation that explicitly rejected their parents' citizenship applications. The Army established specialized interpreter training at Camp Ritchie, Maryland, in 1942. The Military Intelligence Training Center focused on German and Italian language instruction, but soon expanded to include specialized roles for polyglot soldiers. Chinese American recruits arrived with unique qualifications. Many had grown up translating for their immigrant parents in cities like San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. They spoke Cantonese or Mandarin at home, learned English in public schools, and picked up Spanish, Italian, or German in ethnically diverse urban neighborhoods. Staff Sergeant Thomas Lum enlisted in Sacramento in March 1942, 3 months after Pearl Harbor. His father operated a small restaurant serving Chinese-American cuisine to railroad workers. Lum had attended Sacramento High School, where he studied German as a foreign language requirement and worked as a translator for Italian produce vendors at the city market. When Army recruiters learned he spoke 4 languages fluently, they flagged his file for intelligence work. Sergeant James Wong from San Francisco's Chinatown joined in May 1942. His family operated an import business, and Wong had spent childhood summers in Hong Kong before the war, making him fluent in Cantonese, Mandarin, and English. He had studied French at the University of California, Berkeley. When war came, Wong left his junior year to enlist. Corporal David Lee from New York City arrived at Camp Ritchie in July 1942. Lee had grown up in Manhattan's small Chinese enclave, where his mother ran a laundry service. He spoke Cantonese with family, Yiddish with Lower East Side neighbors, Italian with restaurant suppliers, and had taken German classes at City College of New York. Army intelligence recognized his potential immediately. Training at Camp Ritchie lasted 16 weeks. The curriculum covered interrogation techniques, document analysis, order of battle intelligence, and battlefield translation. Chinese American soldiers found themselves in classes alongside Jewish refugees from Germany and Austria, Japanese American linguists preparing for Pacific deployment, and second-generation European immigrants. The irony was not lost on them. America's restrictive immigration laws had created exactly the polyglot population, now essential for military intelligence. Daily life at Camp Ritchie reflected wartime America's complicated relationship with race. Chinese American soldiers faced no formal segregation. They slept in the same barracks as white soldiers, ate in the same mess halls, trained on the same obstacle courses. Yet informal discrimination persisted. Some white soldiers refused to share canteen tables. Local Maryland establishments occasionally denied service. Military police patrols sometimes stopped Chinese American soldiers in uniform, demanding identification papers with suspicion usually reserved for enemy aliens. The weapons training integrated tactical intelligence with combat fundamentals. Chinese American interpreters qualified on the M1911 .45 caliber pistol, the standard sidearm for intelligence personnel. They learned the M1 Garand rifle, the 8-round, semi-automatic 30-06 infantry weapon that would dominate European battlefields. Some trained on the M1 carbine, a lighter, 15-round, 30 caliber weapon favored by officers and specialists. The Thompson submachine gun, firing 45 caliber rounds at 700 rounds per minute, became essential for close-quarters combat during interrogations in contested areas. Intelligence training emphasized linguistic precision under stress. Instructors created simulated battlefield conditions, smoke grenades, blank fire, shouted commands in German, and required trainees to interrogate role-playing prisoners while maintaining composure. The goal was automatic response. In combat, there would be no time for dictionary consultation or careful translation. Lives depended on instant comprehension and accurate communication. Chinese American soldiers also learned the peculiar challenges of their position. Unlike uniformed infantry who faced clear combat roles, intelligence personnel occupied ambiguous space. They would work behind friendly lines, but often mere hundreds of yards from enemy positions. They would interrogate prisoners, requiring close contact with hostile soldiers. They would translate captured documents in field conditions, deciphering handwritten German script while artillery pounded nearby. The work demanded linguistic skill, cultural knowledge, physical courage, and emotional resilience. By early 1944, approximately 200 Chinese American interpreters had completed Camp Ritchie training, most deployed to England in preparation for the cross-channel invasion. They joined intelligence sections attached to infantry divisions, armored divisions, and corps headquarters. Their mission: exploit enemy intelligence during the liberation of Europe. The months before D-Day brought final preparations. Chinese American interpreters studied Wehrmacht organizational structures, German military terminology, and Nazi propaganda language. They memorized enemy unit designations, learned to identify German equipment from silhouettes, and practiced interrogation approaches that might extract tactical information from frightened or defiant prisoners. They also confronted a strange psychological burden. They would invade France wearing American uniforms, fighting for a nation that denied their parents basic rights. The Chinese Exclusion Act remained law. Their families back home still could not testify in court in California. Their mothers and fathers still faced deportation threats, yet here they prepared to risk death for American victory. The journey to Normandy began in the dark early hours of June 6, 1944. Staff Sergeant Thomas Lum boarded a landing craft with the 4th Infantry Division's intelligence team, designated to land on Utah Beach. The Higgins boat, 36 feet long and 10 feet wide, carried 36 men through choppy channel waters. Lum carried his M1 carbine, a waterproof case containing interrogation materials, and a small Cantonese English dictionary his mother had given him, a talisman more than a tool. The run to shore took 90 minutes. Men vomited from seasickness. Cold spray soaked through uniforms. The ramp dropped at 0630 hours. Lum splashed into waist-deep water, holding his carbine overhead, and waded through floating debris toward the beach. Artillery shells crashed into the surf. Machine gun fire kicked up sand geysers. He ran toward a seawall, diving behind a concrete obstacle as mortar rounds impacted nearby. Utah Beach, by fortune and miscalculation, proved less deadly than Omaha. The 4th Infantry Division landed 1,800 yards south of the intended target, in a sector with lighter German defenses. By midday, American forces had pushed inland. Lum's intelligence section established a temporary interrogation post in a captured German bunker. Within hours, the first prisoners arrived. The Wehrmacht soldiers looked terrified, boys mostly, 18 or 19 years old, hands raised, uniforms soaked and torn. Lum spoke to them in German, his Camp Ritchie training taking over. He separated them by rank, identified officers who might possess valuable intelligence, and began systematic questioning. Where were their units positioned? What strength? What reserves? The young Germans talked, desperate to survive, and Lum translated their answers into tactical intelligence that flowed up the chain of command. By nightfall June 6th, 4th Infantry Division intelligence had processed 47 prisoners. Lum personally interrogated 18. The information revealed that German reserves remained confused about Allied landing sites. Hitler still believed the main invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais. This intelligence proved crucial. American commanders pushed inland aggressively, exploiting German uncertainty. Sergeant James Wong landed on Omaha Beach with the 1st Infantry Division's intelligence section. His experience proved far more harrowing. The landing craft struck a sandbar 200 yards from shore. The ramp dropped into deep water. Men weighted down with equipment drowned immediately. Wong, a strong swimmer from childhood summers in San Francisco Bay, struggled toward shore as machine gun fire churned the water around him. He saw men cut in half by German MG-42 fire, 1,200 rounds per minute, a rate so fast it sounded like ripping cloth. Wong reached the beach and crawled behind a disabled Sherman tank. Bodies floated in the surf. Wounded men screamed for medics. The planned timetable had collapsed. Instead of rapid advance inland, American forces huddled behind beach obstacles, pinned down by interlocking fields of fire from German positions on the bluffs above. Wong's intelligence team could not function during the initial chaos. Interrogating prisoners requires secure rear areas, time, and calm. Omaha Beach offered none. Wong spent June 6 fighting as an infantryman, firing his M1 carbine at German positions, helping wounded soldiers to cover, and surviving. The intelligence mission would come later. By June 7th, American forces had secured tenuous control of Omaha Beach. Wong's section established interrogation operations in the village of Colville-sur-Mer. The first prisoners arrived, older men, garrison troops, Osttruppen conscripted from occupied Eastern Europe. Wong discovered many spoke Russian or Polish, not German. His linguistic training proved inadequate for these encounters. He improvised, using hand gestures and fragmentary vocabulary, extracting basic tactical information through patience and persistence. One prisoner, a Georgian conscript named David, spoke broken German. Through Wong's translation, David revealed that many German coastal units consisted of reluctant Eastern European conscripts with minimal training and poor morale. This intelligence suggested opportunities for psychological warfare. American commanders authorized leaflet drops and loudspeaker broadcasts in Russian and Polish, encouraging desertion. Hundreds of Osttruppen subsequently surrendered. Corporal David Lee landed with the 29th Infantry Division on Omaha Beach during the second wave, arriving at 0800 hours. By then, The beach remained under fire, but American forces had begun advancing up the bluffs. Lee's intelligence section moved inland by evening June 6th, establishing operations in the village of Vierville-sur-Mer. Lee's unique linguistic combination, Cantonese, Yiddish, Italian, German, proved unexpectedly valuable. Many Wehrmacht units included Austrian and Bavarian soldiers, whose dialects differed from standard High German taught at Camp Ritchie. Lee's ear for linguistic variation allowed him to understand regional speech patterns that confused other American interrogators. He also encountered Italian prisoners from German Allied units. His Italian, learned in New York's immigrant neighborhoods, enabled direct interrogation without translators. The weeks following D-Day brought grinding combat through Normandy's hedgerow country. Chinese-American interpreters worked in field conditions that would have seemed impossible during Camp Ritchie training. They interrogated prisoners in muddy foxholes during artillery barrages. They translated captured documents by candlelight in ruined farmhouses. They accompanied frontline patrols to provide immediate translation of prisoner statements. Staff Sergeant Lum moved inland with 4th Infantry Division through June and July 1944. His section processed hundreds of prisoners as American forces fought toward St. Lo. The work became routine but remained dangerous. German artillery targeted rear areas. Snipers infiltrated American lines. Lum developed interrogation efficiency. He could extract basic tactical intelligence from a frightened German private in 15 minutes, more detailed information from an officer in an hour. He also experienced the peculiar psychological toll of interrogation work. These German soldiers were enemies, but they were also young men far from home, scared and broken. Lum found himself sympathizing even while maintaining professional detachment. One 19-year-old prisoner from Hamburg cried when Lum questioned him in German, saying he just wanted to see his mother again. Lum thought of his own mother in Sacramento, imagined her worrying, and felt the strange kinship of shared humanity across enemy lines. By late July, Allied forces broke out from Normandy. Operation Cobra shattered German defensive lines. American armored divisions raced across France. Chinese-American interpreters worked around the clock as thousands of German prisoners flooded rearward. The intelligence sections established assembly areas, sorted prisoners by unit, and conducted rapid interrogations to identify enemy dispositions. Sergeant Wong participated in the liberation of Paris in late August 1944. His 1st Infantry Division entered the city on August 25th. Wong experienced the surreal transition from brutal combat to jubilant celebration. French civilians threw flowers, kissed soldiers, offered wine. Wong, a Chinese-American from San Francisco, found himself embraced as a liberator by Parisians who saw only the American uniform, not racial categories that mattered so much back home. The autumn of 1944 brought new challenges. Allied forces pushed toward Germany's borders. German resistance stiffened. Prisoners became less willing to cooperate, knowing they fought now for their homeland rather than occupied territory. Chinese-American interpreters adapted interrogation techniques, using psychological pressure and careful deception to extract intelligence. Corporal Lee moved with 29th Infantry Division through Belgium in October and November. He interrogated prisoners captured during the fighting for Aachen, the first German city to fall to American forces. These Wehrmacht soldiers showed different morale than those captured in France. They fought harder, surrendered more reluctantly, and proved more resistant to interrogation. Lee developed new approaches, exploiting divisions between Nazi Party loyalists and conscripted soldiers who had lost faith in German victory. December 16, 1944, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. At 0530 hours, German artillery erupted along an 80-mile front. 200,000 Wehrmacht and SS troops, supported by nearly 1,000 tanks, smashed into thinly held American lines. Hitler had launched his final Western offensive, aiming to split Allied armies and capture the port of Antwerp. The Battle of the Bulge had begun. Chinese-American interpreters found themselves thrust into the chaos. Intelligence sections scrambled to identify attacking German units, assess enemy strength, and provide commanders with actionable information. The normal flow of battlefield intelligence collapsed. Communication lines were cut. Units were surrounded. Prisoners were captured under fire and interrogated in makeshift positions, while fighting raged nearby. Staff Sergeant Thomas Lum had been assigned to WWII Corps headquarters near Bastogne. When the German offensive struck, his section found itself in the path of the 5th Panzer Army. On December 17th, Lum interrogated 3 German prisoners captured during the initial assault, SS soldiers from the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler. Unlike Wehrmacht conscripts, these men were fanatical Nazis, hardened veterans of the Eastern Front, committed to Hitler's vision. The interrogation took place in a cellar in the village of Wiltz, Luxembourg, while German artillery pounded the town. Lum spoke to the senior prisoner, an SS sergeant with scars on his face and Knight's Cross at his collar. The German sneered when Lum questioned him in fluent German, making a racial slur about Asian soldiers serving America. Lum maintained professional composure. He had endured worse prejudice stateside. He pressed for tactical information, unit dispositions, attack objectives, timetables. The SS sergeant refused to cooperate. Lum tried different approaches. He mentioned Allied air superiority, implied German defeat was inevitable, suggested cooperation would improve the prisoner's treatment. Nothing worked. Then Lum tried a calculated gamble. He told the German that other SS prisoners had already revealed their division's attack plan. The lie worked. The SS sergeant, not wanting his comrades to appear weak, began talking. He confirmed that German forces intended to capture Bastogne, split the Allied front, and drive toward Antwerp. This intelligence reached WWII Corps headquarters within an hour. American commanders began reinforcing Bastogne. When the 101st Airborne Division rushed to defend the town, they did so partly based on intelligence extracted by a Chinese-American interpreter whose parents could not legally become American citizens. Sergeant James Wong experienced the Bulge from a different angle. His 1st Infantry Division was in reserve near Aachen when the offensive struck. The division rushed south toward the Ardennes on December 17th. Wong's intelligence section set up operations near Buchenbach, Belgium, in the northern shoulder of the German penetration. The mission: interrogate prisoners captured as American forces fought to contain the Bulge. On December 20th, Wong interrogated a German lieutenant captured during fighting near Buchenbach. The officer had been wounded, shrapnel in his leg, bleeding through hastily applied bandages. Wong called for medical attention first, establishing rapport through basic humanity. Once the wound was treated, the German proved willing to talk. Through Wong's translation, the lieutenant revealed that his unit, part of the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, had been promised they would celebrate Christmas in Antwerp. The soldiers had been issued extra rations, winter uniforms, and ammunition, but the offensive was already failing. American resistance had proven stronger than expected. Allied air power, once weather cleared, would devastate German columns. The lieutenant said his men were exhausted, low on fuel, and losing faith. Wong's intelligence confirmed what American commanders suspected: the German offensive had shot its bolt. The weather was clearing. American reinforcements were arriving. The tide would turn. But the most harrowing experience for Chinese-American interpreters during the Bulge came during the investigation of German atrocities. On December 17th, near the Belgian crossroads of Bognes, SS troops from Kampfgruppe had massacred 84 American prisoners of war at what became known as the Malmedy Massacre. American soldiers, many wounded, had been herded into a field and machine-gunned. Corporal David Lee arrived at the massacre site on December 23rd with 29th Infantry Division intelligence personnel. Bodies remained frozen in the snow, contorted in death. Lee had seen combat death before, but this was different: murder, not battle. The survivors who had escaped described SS soldiers walking among the fallen, delivering pistol shots to finish the wounded. Lee participated in the subsequent investigation. American forces captured several soldiers from Camp Krupp Paper in January 1945. Lee interrogated them, translating their statements for war crimes investigators. The Germans denied participation, claimed they followed orders, insisted the Americans had died in combat. Lee maintained professional detachment while translating their lies, but felt rage beneath the surface. These were war criminals attempting to evade justice. The interrogations revealed the SS unit's brutality extended beyond Malmedy. They had murdered Belgian civilians, executed other American prisoners, and committed atrocities across the Ardennes. Lee's translations helped build the case that would lead to war crimes trials. By late January 1945, the bulge had been eliminated. American forces pushed back to their original lines. German losses were catastrophic: 120,000 casualties, 600 tanks destroyed, and irreplaceable reserves consumed. The Wehrmacht would never again mount a major offensive in the West. Chinese-American interpreters had worked throughout the battle in conditions of extraordinary danger and stress. They interrogated prisoners under artillery fire, translated captured documents while German forces surrounded them, and provided intelligence that shaped American tactical decisions. Staff Sergeant Lum alone had interrogated 217 prisoners during December and January, extracting information that identified 23 German units and revealed enemy intentions at critical moments. The experience bonded Chinese-American soldiers with the units they served. White soldiers who had initially viewed them with suspicion now respected their courage and professionalism. Officers who had doubted their loyalty now praised their contributions. The barriers of prejudice, while not eliminated, had been weakened by shared danger and mutual dependence. As Allied forces prepared for the final push into Germany in February 1945, Chinese-American interpreters found themselves in demand. Every division wanted experienced interrogators for the invasion of the Reich. The intelligence they provided, identifying enemy units, revealing defensive positions, assessing morale, would prove essential in the closing months of the European War. The crossing of the Rhine began in March 1945. Chinese-American interpreters accompanied assault forces as American armies drove into Germany's heartland. The pace of operations accelerated. German resistance crumbled in some sectors, intensified in others. Prisoners flooded rearward by the tens of thousands. Staff Sergeant Thomas Lum crossed the Rhine with 4th Infantry Division on March 24 near Worms. His intelligence section processed more than 800 prisoners in the first 48 hours. The Wehrmacht was disintegrating. Young boys and old men, conscripted in desperation, surrendered eagerly. Hardened SS units fought to the death. Lum learned to distinguish between soldiers who wanted to survive and fanatics who required force to subdue. By April, American forces drove deep into Germany. Lum's section entered concentration camps as they were liberated. At Buchenwald, he saw horrors that defied comprehension: skeletal survivors, mass graves, crematoria. He interrogated German guards who claimed ignorance, who insisted they followed orders, who wept at their own fate while showing no remorse for their victims. Lum translated their statements with disgust barely concealed. Sergeant James Wong entered Berlin in May 1945 after Germany's surrender. The city lay in ruins, buildings reduced to rubble, streets cratered by bombs, the Reich Chancellery destroyed. Wong participated in prisoner interrogations during the immediate post-war period, interviewing German military personnel to document war crimes and identify Nazi Party officials attempting to escape justice. The final statistics tell part of the story. Of the approximately 20,000 Chinese Americans who served during World War II, roughly 200 worked as interpreters in the European theater. These men interrogated an estimated 50,000 German prisoners between June 1944 and May 1945. Their intelligence identified hundreds of enemy units, revealed German tactical intentions, and contributed to Allied operational planning. Yet their contributions received minimal recognition. Unlike the celebrated Japanese-American Nisei soldiers of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, Chinese-American interpreters worked in obscurity. Intelligence work rarely generates medals or headlines. Their names appeared in no newspaper stories. Their photographs were not published. They returned home to communities that barely understood what they had done. The personal costs were significant. Corporal David Lee suffered hearing loss from artillery exposure during the Bulge. He would struggle with partial deafness for the rest of his life. Staff Sergeant Thomas Lum experienced what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, nightmares about interrogations, flashbacks to Buchenwald, anxiety triggered by German language sounds. Sergeant James Wong, like many veterans, rarely spoke about his experiences, carrying memories in silence. The broader impact on Chinese American communities proved profound. The military service of 20,000 Chinese Americans during World War II helped shift American attitudes. In 1943, Congress repealed the Chinese Exclusion Act, allowing limited Chinese immigration and naturalization. The change came partly from recognition that Chinese allies fought alongside Americans against Japan, but also from acknowledgement that Chinese Americans had proven their loyalty in uniform. Veterans like Lum, Wong, and Lee returned to civilian life with new status. They had served their country, earned combat ribbons, proved their courage. Communities that had marginalized them before the war now recognized them as veterans entitled to GI Bill benefits, Veterans Administration services, and public respect. It was incomplete justice, but it represented progress. The linguistic skills developed during intelligence training served many Chinese American veterans well after the war. Thomas Lum worked for the State Department during the early Cold War, using his language abilities in diplomatic service. James Wong joined the Central Intelligence Agency, applying interrogation expertise to new enemies. David Lee taught languages at a community college in New York, passing on the skills that had saved lives in Europe. Military intelligence preserved the lessons learned from Chinese American interpreters. Post-war assessments emphasize the value of polyglot soldiers, the importance of cultural knowledge in interrogation, and the effectiveness of integrated intelligence operations. These insights shaped Cold War intelligence services and influenced modern military interpreter programs. Memorialization came slowly. In 1999, the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress began recording oral histories from Chinese American World War II veterans. Lum, Wong, and Lee all participated before their deaths, leaving first-hand accounts of their experiences. Their interviews now reside in national archives, available to researchers and family members. In 2014, the Chinese American World War II Veterans Recognition Project identified and honored surviving veterans. A ceremony in Washington, D.C., presented congressional gold medals to representatives of Chinese American service members. By then, most veterans had died. Lum passed away in 2003 at age 83. Wong died in 2009 at 88. Lee survived until 2016, dying at 94. Their children and grandchildren have worked to preserve their legacy. Family members have donated uniforms, documents, photographs, and medals to museums. The National World War II Museum in New Orleans includes exhibits on Chinese American service. The Chinese American Museum in Los Angeles features permanent displays honoring veterans. The symbolic significance endures. Chinese American interpreters served a nation that had legally excluded their families, proved their loyalty despite prejudice, and contributed to Allied victory through skill and courage. Their story illuminates the complex relationship between race and patriotism in wartime America, neither simple oppression nor easy acceptance, but contested ground where individuals fought for recognition through service. Modern descendants of these veterans serve in today's military, often in intelligence roles. The tradition continues, the lessons persist, the memory must be preserved. The doubters, both German enemies who underestimated American diversity and American racists who questioned Chinese loyalty, learned the truth in Normandy's hedgerows, in the Ardennes snow, in the rubble of the Third Reich. Staff Sergeant Thomas Lum wrote in his final diary entry from Germany, May 8, 1945, "My father was wrong. You can be Chinese and American both fully, both proudly. I proved it with every prisoner I interrogated, every document I translated, every bullet that missed me by inches. We all did." Their story must be remembered, not as footnote but as testament, not as exception but as example, not as past but as precedent for every American still fighting to be seen, to be heard, to be counted among those who serve.